Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be talking about a very, very fun topic, which is, does human sexuality actually work the way we think it does? Aela did a piece on this recently where she was digging through the research and she came to a conclusion very similar to our own, which is the only reason we see sexual orientation, i.e., preference for specific genders, as the predominant aspect of human sexuality is because of weird political stuff that happened in the 80s. And if you actually look at the data, that is a fairly bad way to divide humanity.
I mean, I would add it's also from mostly male researchers doing this, and
Yeah.
men do tend to have a more sex-oriented sexuality. So that makes sense.
So we're going to go through a lot of her research on this. We're going to go through the idea that she's going to promote in this, which is, she calls it like BDSM sexuality, but it's more like a sexuality that is more focused on which partner is the dominant or submissive partner than
Mhm.
focused on the gender of the partner.
Mhm.
As we've pointed out historically, this appears to be the primary form of sexuality in your average woman, not every woman, right?
Mhm.
The same way that not every man is, attracted to women, right?
But
And
on average, it's fair to argue, per the research that Malcolm did, that women exist more along the lines of dominance submission orientation than they do to like attraction to man versus woman, which is more how it is for men.
yeah, and now other people are pulling out this data, which I love and which we're going to go into.
But this is really important, especially considering that, especially for women, BDSM oriented sexuality or like power dynamic oriented sexuality is this pervasive because we are seeing what Aela alluded to in this Substack piece she did, sort of a rise of the sex wars, which she sort of sees as being a predecessor or the next thing after the woke wars, where and we see this on all sides of the political
Mhm.
spectrum. There are people, including women, who are like, this is disgusting. This is, a violation of women's rights. This is violent. This is horrible. And that is for the same reason why in the past you would see many, often predominantly male leaders being like, gay sex is disgusting. This is wrong. And that is because, as you point out in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality exists on a, like, the way we react to things like sources of arousal is we're either aroused or we are disgusted. And so if you may be aroused by something or you could be disgusted by it, and it's very hard to not equate disgust with bad morals. So despite the fact that many women are aroused by being dominated, the women who are disgusted by it just can't model that this could possibly be sexy to someone. They
Yeah, I
just
would,
think
I
like,
would and I
this
and
is
I
for
say not
men.
many women, the vast majority of women are
Yeah.
aroused by being dominated.
Yeah.
And
But
it's funny
in
that
the
like
sex
red
wars,
pill,
people
like
can't wrap their heads around that. They're like, this, it's impossible. It's disgusting. It's immoral.
I love the red pill like figured this out, and it was like their free pass to sex for like a
Yes.
half a generation.
What an arbitrage play. I mean, it still is though. Dominance among men or women. One of the easiest things you can do if you're looking to get partners is to be the dominant
Well,
person.
especially because males have become less dominant over time, likely
Mhm.
due to environmental pollutants. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go into the data on this. And I'm skipping a bit into this because at the beginning she just had a bunch of stats that I don't think were relevant, and we can hit them at the end if we want to or we have time.
It was about other stuff. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily about, yeah.
When it comes to solid BDSM, you start to see a similar bimodal distribution of interest. The most common relationship people have towards BDSM is either completely uninterested or extremely interested. There
Mhm.
isn't much of a middle. In fact, in my data, someone's BDSM interest explains more structured variation in their sexuality than whether they're gay or straight.
Mhm.
And here is a very interesting graph, which is both genders' relative strengths factors and the variance explained by each of these. So this is looking at, if you're looking at one thing that arouses somebody, how explanatory is that going to be of all the other things that arouse that person?
Ooh.
The on a 0 to 10 graph, BDSM is almost an 8, whereas gay to straight is only a 4.5.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
it's not that BDSM is like somewhat more indicative of somebody's actual sexual profile. It is almost twice as indicative.
Yeah.
And then if you're looking at what actually comes between BDSM and gay straight is horror.
Hor
Horror related
horror?
horror, HORROR, is more indicative of somebody's sexual profile if they are interested in horror related content.
What
They
is horror related content?
Guru porn would be an example of that.
That's super
Vor
niche.
would likely be an example of that.
Again,
Like
super niche. Oh, okay, but okay, yeah, because that's not as pervasive, but it is very predictive of
murder
other.
would be an example of that, which
Oh,
is
snap.
common in a
Okay.
lot of things.
Yeah.
Monster related stuff would likely be an example of
Oh,
that.
okay, 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 okay.
So yeah, a lot of stuff that's in a lot of porn. Okay.
Mm.
After gay straight, the next one that's almost the same as gay straight in terms of explanation of profile is incest / age play. After that, again, almost as good is gender play. And then the lowest is sensuality, which is actually a core part of like women's sexual profiles.
What even is that?
And keep in mind, this graph is not about the popularity of each of these. It's about their explanatory values to the variance of other arousal parts of the person's
Right. In
profile.
other words, how predictive is it of, or how much does it correlate with other things?
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, going back to the episode that you did on how political ideology sets clustered.
Yeah, but those said that anything within the cluster is a good indication of everything else.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, this one thing is a much better indication than anything else.
Yeah.
It's like if you could tell just from a person's abortion stance or
Well,
just
no,
from
reverse
rights
it.
stance.
So what the study did that's like this is that being a Democrat in this study was extremely predictive of this huge set of ideologies, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing here is being into BDSM is hugely predictive of a whole bunch of other ideologies, meaning that you can, if you know people are into BDSM, fairly accurately infer a lot of things about their sexuality, the same way where knowing someone is a Democrat or sorry, well, especially a Democrat can enable you to infer a lot of ideologies.
Yeah. But very different because we're talking about one thing versus other things. So I wouldn't go too deep on that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The above graph is a result of factor analysis, basically a process that finds natural clusters in the data. For example, the classic Big Five personality test was built off of factor analysis. Basically, they asked people a bunch of questions and then noticed that questions like, are you the life of a party, were really predictive of answers to a bunch of other questions like, I like adventure, I enjoy chatting with strangers. Thus, if you know somebody is the quote unquote life of the party, you can make a bunch of better guesses about other parts of them in a way that is less true for questions like they like cake more than pie. And what she's saying here is they like cake more than pie is they like males more than females or females more than males. And the I'm the life of the party is the are you into BDSM or horror? If we explain the same process to a bunch of questions about what arouses you, someone's attitudes towards BDSM emerge as the most distinct and defining cluster. People who like it, people who dislike it are distinct and different from each other more so than they are along any other axis. And here you can see just how far apart they are from this screen plot I put here. The sexual interest spectrum into men versus women is not very different from other types of sexual interests. It's just more visible. The category of gender as a sexual interest is a public thing heavily ritualized by culture. This makes sense since males and females having fetishes for each other's bodies results in reproduction and thus has gotten real popular and become a wholesome cornerstone of civilization and media and identity. I love how she describes males and females have a fetish for each other's bodies and it got popular and it's a cornerstone of civilization and identity. You swap out just the type of body that goes through the ritual, marriage, and so we get the concept of sexual orientation as distinct from other types of sexual interests. There's no quote unquote marriage concept for other fetishes. And the core reason of this is John Money. We haven't done the episode on him yet, but we have filmed it and he is a monster. And he was the one who invented this concept. It is not a natural thing to think. You might say that gendered sexual orientation is distinct for reasons besides social orientation, such as it wholly defines who you can have a satisfying sexual relationship with. This is obvious from accounts of gay people who didn't know they were gay trying to make straight relationships work. Quote, anything physical felt forced, like I was an actor playing a role I never understood why people liked kissing or sex. For me, it was uncomfortable at best, painful at worst. I was never attracted to men. I was just with them because it was expected. But you can find near identical accounts from people with other types of sexual orientations too. BDSM as a sexual orientation I thought there was something off about my sexuality since high school because I didn't get turned on when hooking up with my partners. I thought maybe I was gay, but it was the same with the girl I dated. I was attracted to her and enjoyed physical contact with her, but I couldn't get turned on the way I did when I was fantasizing about dark things alone in my bed. I did get turned on in a few in person situations, a girl holding me down and kissing me, a guy fingering me on the dance floor while I squirmed away, and eventually I realized that's what I was into. Once I got comfortable enough telling people what I was into, it took a while, I started having good sex. I am not disgusted by vanilla sex, but it is a similar vibe to cuddling for me and can be awkward because I am simply not turned on by even the hottest person imaginable gently going down on me.
Hmm.
And then another person said, I occasionally want vanilla sex with people I really love, but I don't get turned on by it.
See, this is so the rising sex wars, I think, is super, super damaging, especially to women, because already it's a really big problem. I think that many women don't realize that they could have incredibly satisfying sex if they were just aware of this dynamic.
Yeah,
Like,
and then
I cannot emphasize, based on the data that you found in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, how many women are having these experiences where they are having vanilla loving sex with their partners.
they're just like, I'm not into this at all.
Yeah, and they're
Why
like,
is
"Well, I
that?
guess I just," and they're like, "Well, women don't really, they're not into sex, and they don't realize that, like," and Aela describes this in the blog post too. She's like, I didn't, I had a little bit of like sort of the vanilla experience to begin with, and then, but like she just thought she didn't have a sex drive.
Well, oh, no, and this is why it's very important to educate young women about this, or
Mhm.
they can end up thinking they're gay when they're not gay.
Yeah.
Same with young men. They can end up thinking they're trans when they're not trans. When you do not explain normal sexual profiles, and here I'm not defining normal by what Christians accept or what society
Yeah,
accepts,
by
but
actual sexual
but
profile.
by frequency, at least within our current system,
Yeah.
you end up with people making really bad decisions about who they are and their life choices.
Yeah,
It
at
can,
worst, and at best, you have people who live their entire lives with no sexual satisfaction,
yeah,
despite
and
maybe being, happily married and having sex multiple times a week. Can you imagine?
yeah, yeah. No, it's honestly a really sad outcome, and these women who go into this like anti-porn, anti-kink rants and everything.
Well, yeah, because that so like to all the women, that those women who are fully disgusted by this and who think it's morally bad, like it's not like they're pretending. It's not like they're hiding something, or they know the truth. They don't
Some
know the
are,
truth. Okay,
some
maybe
are.
some are. I want to think that they don't know the truth. But now this is like, so the women who haven't yet discovered that their sexuality is, as Aela calls it, BD sexuality, are thinking, well, I better never ever get involved with that, because that is me being hurt by people,
Yeah.
me being victimized and hurt and traumatized, and then they never discover it, and they live
No,
sexually
I
unsatisfying
honestly
lives.
believe that the women who like freak out and go on rants about this, it reminds me of how we keep finding like like Republican who are like anti-sex, anti-porn guys, like in public bathrooms having sex with random
Oh.
men,
Oh, you
or
think they're
like
secretly
even
into it? I don't know. I mean, like, keep
political
in mind, like, a
preachers
lot of the
getting
men
caught.
who are super anti-gay are like literally just, from a sexual orientation standpoint, very, very disgusted by male bodies.
I think the majority of the men who are the most anti-gay are gay. Like,
Eh,
this is something we keep seeing in the data, right? Like,
yeah.
the thing is that if you're actually just like grossed out by men or like turned off by choking or whatever, and
You
you,
just
especially if you
let
have a
it alone.
long-term partner and it's not like an active threat to you when you're going out and hooking up with people, you just don't think about it that much.
Uh,
It's the people who are constantly thinking about it and needing to suppress it who are the
oh,
ones who constantly talk about it.
oh.
Which is, I think, why you see us where we're like, "Oh, this is curious," but, like, we just don't have that much of a horse in this race. We're like,
Mm.
"Don't screw up your kids, but, whatever." Whereas the people who get, like, really passionate and go on these big tirades about, like, "Men choke us," and I'm like, "You are thinking a lot about men choking you." I don't know if, like, and as we've pointed out, women actually have your average woman, like, if you're looking at the percentage of women who prefer this, more women are turned on by this than turned off by this.
Yeah, and but
Um
the and PSA, as you point out in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, which is free to our Patreon premium subscribers, audiobook and ebook. It You really, like, as much as that might turn you on, you really shouldn't. Like, in terms of these sexually related deaths out there, auto asphyxiation is
No, you shouldn't.
yeah.
It's dangerous. We
Yeah,
talk
like
about
there are other
misconceptions.
ways that you can get satisfaction, almost certainly. So please be
Yeah.
careful if that does turn you on, because danger.
Anyway, to quote one of her friends
Mm.
who anonymously talked to her about this, she goes, "I occasionally have vanilla sex with people I really love, but I still don't get turned on by it. Either I make sex purely about connecting with eroticism, or I think kinky thoughts and get turned on that way." So they're having vanilla sex and they're like, I love it. She quotes this as a non-friend. Part of me wonders if this is her just writing as an non-friend. I think
She
she
asked
talked
for
to.
quotes.
Yeah, true.
No, I
If
think she no, I think
you
she really did this research.
if you swapped out, well, obviously she did. She has huge sample sets. This was done on a
No, no,
sample
no.
set.
But I mean, in terms of the quotes she included in there, she really worked hard to source those.
If you swapped out kinky stuff for gay stuff, this would be indistinguishable from accounts of gay people trying to navigate life before they
Totally.
figured out what they were.
Yes.
And then she says, and I like this because she talks about it from personal experience, I am one of these tales. I've been into BDSM type stuff as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories, 4 or 5 years old, were proto-sexual fantasies with bondage, well before I had any exposure to anything sexual, whatever.
Mm.
I was in denial about it for years, and my first relationship was vanilla. After the initial novelty with my boyfriend wore off, so did our sex life entirely. I thought I had simply had a low sex drive. Sex seemed like a chore. I figured that's just the way sex was for everyone. Women weren't supposed to like sex that much. Am I right? But it turns out, actually, no, it wasn't that I didn't like sex. It was that I didn't like vanilla sex. And this is where I'd push back against this narrative that we sometimes see on the right, which is that an individual gets corrupted by kinky stuff, and formerly they were able to be turned on by normal things, and now that they've engaged in kinky stuff, they no longer get turned on by normal things. When if you actually look at the data, and we talk about this in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, what often actually happens is an individual is not particularly turned on by normal things, and then they finally figure out how to activate arousal in themselves through kinky stuff, and without that, they never would have had an arousing sexual life. And where this creates problems is around individuals who grew up never being exposed to anything that significantly aroused them, and then they finally find something that significantly arouses them, in their teens or as an adult, and they didn't build up the resistance to those types of things, and so they end up having major problems around it. But it's not because the thing is kinky, it is because they were never exposed to anything that really aroused them in the way that other people were aroused by things all the time. Once I started engaging in kinky relationships, surprise, I suddenly had a vicious sex drive. Sex became bonding, transcendent, and wonderful. The way everyone else had been talking about it finally made sense. Nowadays, I engage in exclusively in kinky relationships. And here there's a graph she has of a non-consent interest score by age of first interest.
Oh,
And what you can see is the non-consent thing, whether it is, cis males, cis females, etc., non-cis, way stronger and more powerful if you first were interested in it before the age of 5.
wow. Whoa. Man, people have good memories.
And
Don't know
then,
what I was up to then.
stronger still if it's like before the age of 10, and then it drops down a lot and you don't see as much, if you get to it between like 15 and 20.
Hmm.
And as she says here, for most fetishes in my data, the earlier the age of onset of a fetish, the more extreme the fetish tends to be. People who report BDSM related fetishes starting at the age of 5 or earlier were the most into it. This is usually well before exposure to porn or likely anything sexual at all. This is good evidence, I think, for BDSM and sexual orientations in general, not just gender-based ones, being innate or otherwise quite early. And I'll note here, I've mentioned, where I have non-normative arousal patterns. They started way before puberty for me, like at least half a decade before puberty for me.
Same.
And when
But
I would
not 5. How do you remember
no,
anything that
not
happened to an age
5.
of
I
5?
went through puberty super late. I went through puberty at, like, 16 and a half,
That's
like,
crazy.
super late. But the point here being is before that, when I would, lay in bed and create fantasy worlds and create, stuff like that, like, the the things that later I recognized were arousal were major features in these worlds. But
Mhm.
at the time, I didn't contextualize them that
Of
way,
course not. Yeah.
which I think shows that these are not things that are created by, environments when you're a kid. Certainly nothing happened to me when I was a kid. I think a lot of it is actually genetic and cultural,
Yeah.
to be honest. And like, we're not allowed to talk about that. We're not
And
allowed to be
we 100% see this in
like Japan. Like, they prefer phenotypically young partners,
yeah, and
much
erotic
younger than
materials
their
across country. Yeah.
yeah.
And like the auntie porn that we kept having to take off that one site that I worked at early in my
And this is
career.
in India, where they like older women, who show what,
It was
like
like armpits and just sort of, yeah, just middle-aged women, like not really
that
looked
would be no interest to me at all.
yeah,
Like,
it was very strange, but it was clearly a thing for some people, and I think it was clustered genetically. Yeah.
yeah, and that's okay. Like, I
Mhm.
know that we're, for whatever reason, not allowed to talk about this, but I think that a lot of this is just genetic.
Yeah. Yeah. You do
Um,
you, you know? Whatever.
Now, this may seem tangential or weird to talk about, that usually the things that later become fetishes become things that people get interested in long before they go through puberty, but it actually matters a lot if you are, for example, worried about your kids becoming, sexual deviants. I think the perception is, oh, they're going to see some weird, website, and that's going to turn them on to all this stuff. When if you actually read forums around people who have paraphilias or fetishes, what it almost always is, oh yeah, there was that Power Rangers episode, or that episode of a cartoon when I was a kid, or that, how many people were awakened by one of the Spy Girls episodes is a major joke.
Aw, you have all their flavor.
Are you kidding me?
If there was a show that truly questioned the purpose of a cartoon, it was totally Spies.
Great! What are we gonna do now?
I mean, seriously, what the is this cartoon? One can't help but ask if Totally Spies was fetish fuel in disguise. If the people who made this cartoon were subtly telegraphing their fetishes. I mean, yeah, that's quite the bizarre accusation. But trust me, there is some interesting evidence that supports that claim. Really, really interesting. There's bondage, feet, schoolgirls, mummification, buried in sand, wigs, life draining, shrinking, muscles, skirts, sneezing, bondage, swimsuits, cross-dressing, sweating, face swap, covered in mud, covered in gum, brainwashing, wrestling, bondage, showering, transformation, furries, towels, head enlargement, Rule 63, cheerleading, entanglement, ripped clothes, weight gain, forced feeding, giant girls, tattoos, frozen, maid outfits, cat girl outfits, aging, bondage, and shrinking clothes. So do you see where I'm coming from?
But also, seriously, like, what is with the French who made that show? Like, Totally Spies is very sus for a children's show. Or, the people think, oh, they're going to be turned into furries by, going to a furry convention or hanging out with furries, when instead it's watching the Disney's Robin Hood, which turns somebody into a furry. This matters because it goes against the intuition a lot of people have, and it causes people to attempt to shield their kids from things that aren't actually relevant in the development of paraphilias. Although I should place a special caveat with furries here, because there actually are communities of furries that become common in schools and recruit kids that don't have this as a paraphilia, but are just normal kids and like pretending to be animals. As you can see in the recent videos we've had on ours, our kids have liked wearing, animal ears recently and pretending to be like a fox or a cat. That is a normal phase kids go through, and sometimes other kids can psyops them into very weird beliefs using urban monocultural ideas, or especially if they happen to be autistic or something. But here I'm specifically talking about paraphilias and not the predatory communities. When you can't do anything about it. If you contextualize it as deviant, it leads to deviant actions.
And that's such an important point. Yeah, your arousal patterns are not an endorsement of those things. And I think for a lot of women, it's also really hard to navigate BD-Sexuality. I'm just using Aela's coinage because it's fun, because women don't condone unauthorized surprise sex or
Even if they prefer it.
Yeah, even if they prefer it, even if it really turns them on. Like, that doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean they want it to happen. But it does mean that in some scenarios where they may simulate it, that it's really sexy for them. I mean, so one thing that I'm wondering about, though, as I'm talking about this with you, is there may be a lot of guys, like married guys, who are listening to your podcast who are like, well, so I've only had vanilla sex with my wife. She's not very sexually adventurous at all, and she has zero sex drive. And maybe they're wondering now, like, well, crap, like, does my wife have a sex drive that she just doesn't realize?
Is something you want to explore? Yeah, I mean,
how do you explore it? If like, because I think a lot of women are uncomfortable talking about their sexuality.
No,
like, what do you do?
Books is she reading?
Oh.
How does she engage with sexuality in literature? While our society has a lot of taboos against women engaging with this publicly, if your wife is reading 50 Shades of Grey, that's
giveaway.
That's a giveaway, right? Like, you might see this as innocuous. It's not innocuous. That is saying something.
Fair.
If she is spending a lot of time in the monster effer part of the library, as I mentioned before, one unique arousal pattern I've mentioned publicly is I find vampires really hot. Like, before I went through
everyone thinks vampires are hot.
No, not everyone does. Really, only a few. I remember West Virginia was like the cultural hotspot.
Is this like a
Utah and West
person?
Virginia. Yeah,
just an us thing?
I remember.
Come on, the vampire movies are super big. But I guess in like white people territory. Never mind. So maybe it's
I think it's like a white person thing, maybe. But like, vampires and werewolves, I was like, every other book, and even though I hadn't gone through puberty, these were books I was getting from the vampire and werewolf section of the aisle, which means that they definitely had like sexual undertones, right?
Yeah.
And the question is why are people doing this? Like, why are they engaging with this stuff even before puberty, right? Like, and I think that that's also really important for people to contextualize.
Yeah.
A lot of girls, especially when they're engaging with this content, it's before they actually start to feel arousal. When they are reading their first, vampire stories or their first, whatever it is that turns them on, right? Eventually.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, it's crazy how young kids learn about vampires. I mean, our kids know everything about vampire and zombie lore. And
you got very mad. Did you know there's like a zombie movie now that's like
big?
Yeah. So this, I don't know, it came out a few years ago, but it was like a movie for people who like want to slowly eat other people.
Wait, what? What?
Yeah, it's about a girl and a guy, and it was clearly like about the sexual undertones. It's like a thing. They came out like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
There were 2 of them. It turns out raw and bones and all. But I guess I'm saying like
good for
Tina,
them.
whatever from Bob's Burgers.
Remember you let me watch Night of the Living Dead when I was 8? So now I wake up every night standing in the middle of my room.
Wait, you still get those?
Yeah, they're weirder now.
Oh boy.
I think my subconscious fears and my budding sexuality are getting all mixed up.
Oh, okay. Tina, I don't want to hear about it.
So I think I'm being attacked by zombies, and I start screaming, "Do you want to make out?" And I make out with it.
I might just bunk with Graham and Gramps.
Okay, enough. Jean, Louise, you sleep in Tina's room. Tina, you're quarantined. You sleep alone. We'll strap you down or something.
Leave my lips free.
Okay.
And I was like, well, hey, keep in mind.
It's not my fetish. I guess I just can't.
There's the Zombie High, which is a very popular Disney show.
Yeah.
Where you've got the zombies and then like cheerleaders, and then they added werewolves, and then they added aliens. I don't know what else they've added since.
Because why not? Yeah.
Why not?
Go for it.
No, I mean, asking why are people into this stuff when it's contextualized in a romantic context is interesting.
Yeah.
For something so innate, resistance to attempts to change, and for something that so radically affects the type of relationships that work, it's odd that we don't have a term for this type of sexuality. So I'm going to refer to people with innate BDSM preference as BDSM sexual.
No, as BD smexuals.
BD smexuals. Oh, wait, sorry. As people without a tender sexual. That's what she calls the other thing. Tender sexual
versus BD smexuals.
BD smexuals.
Yeah.
And she says she apologizes for the cheesiness. Inventing words is her dump stat.
I love that for Aela. So we have gay, straight, and then we have tender sexuals and BD smexuals.
But this is also important to know, right? Like, if you are entering a relationship, and this is one of the reasons why this whole like, oh, no women's into this, no guy is into this, all of this stuff is bad. Like, it's bad because it causes people to enter relationships with people they are not sexually compatible with.
Yeah, can you imagine tender sexual marrying BD smexual? It can't work out. You can't fake that kind of stuff. It's
No, you can't. Like it does not work. And
Yeah.
you're going to end up like you could, I mean, you can fake it. Like there's beards and stuff, but it's no different from living with a beard. And I think it probably leads to a lot of divorces in cultures that are uncomfortable talking about this.
I mean, yeah,
So-
unless you're like really happy to have a sexless marriage, which
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this is in part due to like if you look at Mormon culture or something, right? Like I think a higher number of divorces might be due to them just not talking about this,
yeah.
especially when BD-smexuals are clearly a big, not unusual within Mormon culture.
Yeah, clearly.
If you
yeah.
look at the books that they're creating, like Twilight and
Yeah,
stuff, I'm like, come on,
seriously.
you guys. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you
We
guys
see
are
what's
about.
going on. Yeah.
We see what's going on.
But what's sad is that there may be like you may have two BD-smexuals married, but because this is such a taboo thing, it's almost like two gay people in a straight relationship, but like not realizing they can just be gay together.
Yeah.
Sad.
Why the porn debate is stupid. In the sex wars, I am increasingly viewing as the successor of the woke wars, many tender sexual feminists are very upset about how quote unquote degrading porn is. Women are spit on, slapped, and choked. How bad and offensive. This does look pretty bad if you're tender sexual.
It really
Gay
does.
people looked pretty bad and offensive to heterosexual people for a lot of history. But I think they fail to realize that a large minority of women who are BD sexual, for whom BDSM is just a deep part of their sexuality, as lesbianism is to lesbians.
Mhm.
And this is more of a female or submissive thing than a male. I would note here, if you go by Aela statistics on the number of women who would fall into this BD sexual category, it would be way higher than the proportion of men who are born same-sex attracted. Men's sexuality is more responsive to general sluttiness, while women are overwhelmingly at least a little into power dynamics. And I've noted this before. Like men are not as captured by this as women are. So
Mhm.
if I'm putting a graph on screen here, this is how erotic do you find being the sub. In females, you see a huge extremely here. And for men, even in terms of not, you just don't see it. Like men are just not that, they don't care as much.
Yeah.
How erotic do you find being the dom? With males, you find like, so to get an idea, so for women who get really turned on by being the sub, you're looking at near 50%. For men who like really being the dom, you're looking at 25%.
Hmm.
So it's just a way lower number. And again, this
Mhm.
is why I always get so frustrated by people who are like, oh, well, clearly men are forcing this on women. I'm like, look at the stats, lady.
Well, and also this just to go back to stuff that you cover a lot in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality. This makes evolutionary sense that men really wouldn't need to care that much about power dynamic because the thing that would ensure their survival was making sure that the thing they had sex with was capable of producing offspring.
Yes, and for women, you
the
would
thing that ensured
regularly-
their survival was ensuring that the thing that they had sex with was powerful. That
and
was it.
didn't kill them.
And didn't kill them. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, no, that's more common than you would think.
Yeah,
given
yeah.
the number of villages that were raided and stuff like that, and we talk about this anyway.
Yeah. So being kind of turned on by the raider who's coming into your village and doing naughty things is probably better than you resisting to the death, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
I think that this is in part why you see this instinct in women, as we've seen, to welcome aggressive immigrant populations
Mm.
and pretend like they're a complete non-issue when
Oh
they
my gosh.
very clearly are.
Ooh, that never occurred to me, but you could be onto something there. That's dark.
Yeah, no, it is dark. They
It's
are
just their-
betraying their people and their future and their potential
Just
children.
their village being raided, survival instinct kicking in.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, come on, Raiders. I'm a big fan of Sharia law.
Oh my
You know?
gosh. So bad. That's so bad.
The grooming gangs? Come on, it's barely grooming.
I'm just trying to make it by here. Yeah.
And then Aela goes on to say, you don't need my grass to know this. Look at the overwhelming popularity of groups like 50 Shades of Grey or the raunchy, rough dominance common in most popular women's erotica. I always get so frustrated when feminists are like, men are disgusting. Have you seen the weird stuff that they have on their porn sites? And I'm like, excuse me, I've seen the weird stuff you women put in Barnes and Noble, okay? The entire monster effer aisle, that is not something that you see at the same frequency, even in the male centers of debauchery.
What are all these packets in here? There's no room in the freezer for this ice cream. Why is it blood? For who's Brad? I thought you were dating a werewolf. Brad's a vampire? It's a different guy. So now you're dating a vampire? Okay. Does he have a home where he can keep his blood food? Does it have to be in our freezer? Because I want ice cream in my freezer. I don't want blood in my freezer. I'm not being... Don't you dare accuse me of being small-minded. I don't... It's my freezer. Does Brad pay for the freezer? No. Whose blood is this?
What are all these charges? They're all for like $70 and it's just a bunch of iron pills? What for? So Evangeline's back with Brad the Vampire, and so I don't think I want to hear this, but we're buying her iron tablets to make sure she doesn't... Oh, God. Can't we just say don't? Isn't there like a wait till... I don't know, never? Don't ever let a vampire... Okay. All right, no, I get it. Like, be safe, but also... Wow.
Brad's 1,000 years old. That's right, yeah. Nope, because I was talking to Evangeline, and she was talking about history class, and she was talking about the Inquisition, and Brad was there. She's dating a 1,000-year-old. I don't care if he doesn't look 1,000, he's 1,000. Oh my God, wait, is Chad's a dog. Is Chad 3? This isn't gonna work. I'm being so cool as a dad in so many ways, but if she's dating an 1,000-year-old, and she's also dating a 3-year-old, then we're gonna have a sit down as a family to talk about, what are we even gonna talk about? I'm gonna sit down. No, just right here on the floor.
Roughly 80% of women in my data are sexually submissive, which you could say is the default female sexuality, which, by the way, is higher than the number of women who are not attracted by women. About 20% of women and about 15% of men are BDSM
BDSMexual.
Innately and deeply oriented towards BDSM. And I note here that this is more common for women than for men, by a significant margin in her data set.
Yeah, so if you're a man listening to this and you just don't get it, like, yeah, it's mostly a woman.
Yeah, because most men are tender sexual. Even though men don't want to hear that, this is what men mean when they're like, I just want bromance.
But yeah, when you look at male erotic material, it's slutty, very enthusiastic women who just really want it. They just really want it.
And, yeah, they're just like, oh, I just really wish, instead of, the average man being like, I just really wish I could hunt people. Like, I don't understand why all you guys are so focused on sex. I just really wish I could hunt people.
The ultimate sport.
The ultimate sport. Yeah, it's the most entertaining, right? As my data has slightly inflated kink rates, I'd estimate something closer to 15% of women and 10% of men are BDSMexual. Men tend to be slightly less polarized than women. You could say they have higher rates of BDSM bisexuality or switchiness, like able to do both roles. And for more on this particular topic, you can look at my Raider versus Homesteader sexual profile in men, where men may have an adaptive sexual profile because the optimal arousal profile when you are raiding a village is very different from the optimal arousal profile when you are caring for your wife and kids. And so men may actually have like 2 local optimum, with most men falling within both. And because a lot of men learn about their sexuality through pornography, which their brain would see as disposable rated individuals, they think of themselves as far more BDSMexual than they really are, and they're actually more tender sexual in long-term relationships. But anyway, in general, women prefer more violent porn than most men do, and she has a citation here: rougher sex than men think they'd like. This holds true in my data, whether you're measuring my own followers or an anonymous paid survey respondents. And then here she has a how much of the porn you watch is violent graph. And as you can see, it's women who are into this. What's also interesting is, other than women, who else is really into it? Trans men. So women with additional stuff. The people who are least into it are cis men. After trans women are the most into it, then it's women, and then after women it's trans women, and then cis men are like not into it at all. Like, men are just very, very tender sexual. And I would note here, if you happen to be a man who is, competent and marginally attractive and not a tender sexual, that's a huge arbitrage on dating markets when you're a young man, especially sexual dating marketplaces. You can just absolutely clean up. And I think a lot of my success when I was younger in sleeping with lots of people came down to just being non-tender sexual and being socially competent and normal looking, because apparently that's very rare in males. And it's something that a lot of women are looking for. And here you see a graph here where she has a hard face slapping during smex by violent porn consumption. And here you see what men believe what women would want, like how much of the porn you watch is violent, and what women actually want, which is just like way more. If women watch a lot of violent porn, they're like 70%, like, I'm into this, like, hit me hard, daddy. And then this is something I definitely saw when I used to sleep around a lot. Like, this is why I've always found it to be so effing bizarre when women are like, women aren't into this. And I'm like, yes, they are. Like, why? You mean either you're not into it or you're pretending to not be into it. And the amount you talk about it makes me think you're pretending. Violent porn with distressed women is actually not that popular overall compared to porn with slutty women. I'm currently working on a porn database of the most popular Pornhub videos, and I definitely have my issues with how sex is being presented to people in mass, but so far, violence is rare. I hope to publish this data more. Well, violence against people who aren't into it is rare, is what she's saying here. So I think what we're seeing is very tender sexual women hear about videos of women getting abused. They assume this is rampant. Most anti-porn feminists I hear talk about this and reference how it's quote unquote everywhere. Despite there not being any good data supporting this claim, go check the front page of Pornhub and count how many videos feature women who are showing distress. And if you want something totally fictional, because you're like, well, that's showing real women, you can go to eHentai and you're just not going to see that many. Because that's an entirely fictionalized environment. So presumably, if it was that common, you'd see it everywhere, and you don't. They assume that it's quote unquote teaching men to be more violent and that women don't want this. They are not aware that a substantial minority of women, more so than men, are actually BDSM-sexual. BDSM-sexual women are weirder, more stigmatized, and often stay quiet about their sexual preferences, especially in like group conversations, which is why these women may not know this if they haven't looked at the data. While tender sexual women are more culturally dominant view of female sexuality and enjoy a lot of uncontroversial backing when they frame their own sexual orientation as the moral good that everyone else should follow. And I'd also note here that, like, if you're like, well, what about like the Bible and whatever? Like, the Bible doesn't say that women need to enjoy tender. The closest you're going to come is lines around, loving your wife's body in the way that you love your own, or providing for your wife, or sacrificing for your wife. But if this is something that your wife likes and is turned on by and was coded into her without her consent, and this is the primary way that she gets turned on, I don't see how that goes against this. A line I found used a lot to justify not doing anything that could be considered a form of kink within marital sex is Hebrews 13:4, because it states that a marriage should be undefiled. The problem is the context of this word, and this seems here more tied to adultery than anything else.
No, totally agree with you on this. One thing that shocked me the first time I read, especially the Old Testament, was the amount of both violence and sex. And I don't remember there being a whole lot of people lovingly knowing each other. It happened, but I didn't hear about how tender and romantic it was. So
there's like one instance of some poems about that, but
oh, and Song of Solomon, yeah. But I mean, it was more about romance, not so much about.
Yeah, you don't know what type of, sex they were having. Yeah. You only know about
they could have been really going at it in BDSM-sexual ways. Who knows?
Yeah, no. I mean, you see this as somebody who is fairly on the aggressive side in their sexual profile. I still date people very romantically. Like, you would say that our dating process is very romantic, right? Like, I think that there's this misunderstanding that, oh, well, this means that you got to be a jerk to somebody all the time, like it's what red pillars accidentally believe.
Not at all. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I don't really see a correlation there. Yeah.
Anyway, the tender sexual women exposed to BDS sexuality can be jarring. Quote, she was increasingly opening into her BDSM preferences and really wanted me to be very dominant and forceful. And as it turned out, she was into knife play and whack stuff that left her with bruises. She eventually sought this out outside of the relationship, but it freaked me out seeing her with bruises and burns. I felt very confused and sad. It was weird that this was a thing she wanted, because I was happy to give her things she wanted, but I didn't want to hurt her. And I'm like, okay, yeah, pussy, just say I'm a big old pussy. No, sorry. The point here being is what turns women on when you're looking at and right here she's talking about a tender sexual friend talking about their experience dating a BDS sexual. And she's like, I sympathize with this. If violence, power, sadism, etc., are all things that you've experienced in really terrible contexts, like things villains do to heroes in movies, it can be confusing to think that some people want this. And furthermore, they can find it good and fulfilling. Some insist that BDSMexuals cannot find it good and fulfilling, and they must necessarily be broken or traumatized in some way. Well, it's true that in my data, BDSMexuals are more likely to have experienced rough childhoods than tendersexuals. The majority of both groups still report happy, non-abusive childhoods. And again, we've noted in our data, what happened to you in your childhood really doesn't seem to affect your sexual profile that much. It appears inborn, and I would assume most of it is pre-evolved based on cultural groups and stuff like that. Now, I'd also note here, yeah, like this idea that like, oh, if you're engaging with sexuality this way, it must mean that your relationship is really toxic or that you don't actually care about each other that's just not what I've seen at all in my experience. This is not like where I see people who are polyamorous and I'm like, oh, I'm going to look at their relationship and knock down the probability that it will stay stable. I'm like, oh, they're really just looking for a new partner. When I see monogamous couples engaged in more aggressive forms of sexuality, I normally upgrade their relationship in terms of its likelihood of staying together for a lot of reasons. And not all of them are positive. One is that there is a higher probability that the other partner has dirt on you that's going to lower the chance that you leave a relationship. You also are going to feel that finding a partner who is compatible with you is less likely if you attempt to trade out for another partner. Thoughts, Simone?
No, I agree. This is uncontroversial to me.
But I mean, you must know women who are into this versus women who aren't, and their relationship profiles after they engage with it with their partners versus the ones who are just.
I think the broader issue is I don't know the sexual profiles of my female friends because they don't talk about it. And I think a lot of women are not in touch with their sexuality at all.
Well, I think a lot of women, especially who have this sexual profile, are very afraid to talk about it with other women.
Or even admit it to themselves. Like it's strictly relegated to the fantasy novels that they read, and it doesn't even make it into their relationships. I mean, we have been exposed to some very sexually self-aware communities, like with rationalists and all the poly communities that we had friends within. But most women, like that I know from childhood or I know just through circumstance, super not in touch with their own sexuality, like at all. And the only place where I see women like feeling comfortable or empowered talking about their sexuality, regardless of political affiliation, is just buying vibrators. And that's because like sex toy companies they have marketing
talking, getting them women talking.
Yeah, and like basically the only way that I'm seeing women on like in like general society's women in the United States, at least, getting sexual satisfaction is by themselves using a vibrator. No, seriously.
That's really sad. No, it's using a vibrator in their teen dystopia novel.
I mean, but actually, like, and like literally, that's the only discussion of sexual satisfaction that I hear. Not like, hey, have you explored different kinks you might have or whatever? Like, and that happens. You know, I think even when it happens in the more sex positive communities that are out there, which by the way, like, you know, I used to think that like, okay, well, the rationalist community and EA are like super sex positive and like open to talk about these things. But now it's turning out that even they are now becoming fractured with these sex wars.
They're becoming really freaked out about sex these days.
Yeah. So then there's like the few sex positive people. And I feel like this puts Aela in a terrible position because, you know, she's now tagged as being like the gateway drug to sexual depravity when all she's doing is being open and honest about her findings. And she's open about her enjoyment of things. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to enjoy it, but they're like putting it on her. They're like, no, you're proselytizing this. You're doing, like, she's not, but now she's getting caught up in this. And so even within the few sex positive communities that I encountered, now they're even not clear.
Well, now and I'd also note here that like if you're talking about like, and this is one of the reasons why it's so like harmful to not talk about the various sexual profiles that people have, is well, I would say you should not marry for the quality of the sex or anything like that. The probability that somebody who has a unique sexual profile, like a fetish, you would call it, that their partner is fulfilling, is going to seek sex outside of the relationship is dramatically lower than somebody who is only securing vanilla sex within a relationship, because you can get vanilla sex from other people, whereas sourcing non-vanilla sex is dramatically harder. And the individual who's like, well, I wasn't willing to do this for my partner, so she just ended up being with other people. This is an individual who's just like, I knew this turned my partner on. They told me it turned them on. I decided to superimpose my morals around sexuality. Like, well, if it physically hurts you, then you must hate it. And the partner's like, well, but I really want this, right? And this is the female partner, by the way, in this, right? Like, and they're like, well, I am the paragon of, and then their partner ends up sleeping with other people because that's what happens. And this could be due to sexual incompatibility, but it also could be due to, you know, attempting to signal to a plastic bag, right? Like, oh, I'm such a great male that I don't do X or Y, you know.
Well, and then there's the other approach to this, which is you could take the perspective that all non-procreative sex is a sin. And if you're wasting your time trying to get sexual satisfaction out of life, you're wasting your life. Like, life isn't about feeling good. Life is about meaningfully maximizing that which you believe has value. And if you're not just a pure hedonist, which I think is kind of dumb, then you should probably not be so fixated on this. So, you know, I mean, that's just to not be.
Well, no, I mean, this is our actual larger position on this, which is like, and this is actually our lifestyle. Like, even though I know the things I could do with you that would turn me on the most, and you know the things you could do with me that would turn me on the most, it's almost never worth it, like time-wise, right? Like,
well, I mean, especially because we have so many things we're working on, and there's like the opportunity cost of even a quickie, which is never off the table. But like, still, we really have to think twice about even a quickie.
The whole thing for like an orgasm and a bonding opportunity, and I'm like, I just don't care that much, right? Like, I just do not care, and people are shocked by this. They're like, oh, whoa, how could you? And I'm just like, there are other things in life that are a better use of my time.
Yeah, if that's literally the best use of your time.
Well, okay, for some people it is. Their biology is different from ours.
Yeah, for some people it is, and their values are different than ours, and maybe their opportunity cost is way lower because they're just lower agency.
But I'm like, if you're gonna engage with it, at least engage with it in a way that actually feels good. And
yes,
like,
and that's so that's the important thing. Like, if you are going to be like indulge in hedonism either all the time or sometimes, like, do it well, at least, please. But also, there is so much more to life than sexual gratification.
But I note here, when we say it's a sin, I mean, it's a sin in the same way that, you know, playing video games is a sin, right? Like, it's a sin in the way in doing anything that's non-productive is a sin.
Like,
I don't see it as like
eating more than you need to, like all these things, you know, like, the people who, I mean, there are people who orient their entire lives around their sexualities. There are people who orient their entire lives around traveling and going to fancy restaurants. And these are equally debauched, okay? Like, they are equally sinful. And we're not trying. I'm no more sex negative than I am foodie negative, than I am sports obsession negative, than I am et cetera, right?
Yeah. I mean, the sports I see as worse because they take longer. Like the individual who sits around watching a game all weekend.
Have you? Come on, poly people. It's like a career. It takes
I mean, I'm not talking about poly people. That's like a whole issue there, right? You know,
it's huge investment.
Yeah, I love that people are like, oh, your wife would let you sleep with other people if you wanted to. And I'm like, why would I want to? Like, what's the time investment in that, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's such a waste of time. It is. And people just don't get it. Like, they think that humans have this voracious sexual profile that I do not think that humans actually have, especially when they're adults and have a lot of kids.
Well, one, I think historically there was a lot more poly stuff going on, but I think it's because people lived in very persistent, tight-knit communities, and those other people were available. Like, it was this other couple that you knew, it was this other woman that was in all your social circles, and you constantly had opportunities and the time. So I actually think that before it was a lot easier to be poly or to be a swinger than it is now. Like, now it's hard. Now you have to schedule it. Now you don't always have this passive social time you're spending. So yeah, that's
true. Anyway, to continue here. So a Tinder sexual might ask, why are some people BDSM sexual if they're not traumatized? As one of my Tinder sexual friends said, call me weird, but I like sex where people act like they like each other. You're weird.
Weird.
It's not that, you know, I can't enjoy that, but like, you know, there's other profiles which are interesting as well.
Vampires like the people they victimize in a way, just but they like a burger, you know?
You know, this is a whole other set of blog posts, maybe even a book's worth of material. But basically, if you look at the evolution of apes and a whole lot of history, it's actually kind of weird that BDSM sexuality isn't the default. Power, ownership, dominant, jealousy, harassment, and yes, even full-out grape are integral parts of our closest relatives, minus the bonobos mostly. That not true with the bonobos. Bonobos are the worst. Like a lot of people think that the bonobos are not like that violent, and they're like, oh, they're into more like gay
Peaceful
stuff
and
and women rule.
matriarchal.
Yeah, and I talk about like we have instances where a female bonobo took another bonobo's infant, threatened to rip its head off if the other woman didn't go down on her.
Yeah.
That is
Come on,
worse
man.
than like the worst male chimp stuff.
Yeah, I'm not into that. I'm super not into that.
Like it turns out when you give women power in human relatives, they become complete monsters, which is what we regularly see in bonobos. You can read our book on this. Sexual violence has been among the biggest factors that shaped which of our ancestors got to reproduce and which didn't. For example, one theory is that females that were attracted to sexually aggressive males were more likely to have sexually aggressive and thus sexually successful sons. The big puzzle to me is why it's bimodal. Is this a cultural artifact? I.e., why is it high on the Tinder sexual end and high on the BDSM sexual end? If BDS sexuality is linked to sexual success in our histories, why do we have a substantial fraction of women who are Tinder sexual? Why is there such a huge variance in the type of power dynamics that BDS sexuals prefer? This is one of the big questions of my research I hope to explore more in upcoming posts. And again, for me, because I think that part of this is genetic, like that also means that with my kids, I'm definitely not going to teach them to expect to be Tinder sexuals. Because if my wife isn't and I'm not,
we'll teach them that some people are, though, because I think it's really important for a BD sexual to understand that some people, like, because for Tinder sexuals, this is a really, really bad experience. If someone just goes in hard and like expects that they're going to enjoy this, that is a traumatic experience. So I think it's very important for us to teach them about Tinder sexuality, but to perhaps
well, also I've noted, even on sexual marketplaces, and maybe this extends to marriage place marketplaces, but when I was a kid, in high school and college and sleeping around, like a common experience I had was women would just be sent to me by their friends. Like, oh, you need to try this guy, And I think part of it was understanding the difference between this as a sexual profile and it as a dating profile and the way people want to be treated when they're dating. Which might have been just enough of an arbitrage opportunity that a lot of people were like, oh, he's really nice, but he also knows, how to be aggressive within this context, which, maybe rare enough. But if we're just going to go over a few graphs to end here, because she had a ton of graphs at the beginning, which are pretty interesting.
And I got to make your, what is it called? Bon
chow. So we've got blowjobs here. How erotic do you find it? Males, high on the extreme side, females less so. How erotic do you find anal? Interestingly here, women high on the not side, men prefer it more. How erotic do you find skirts? Again, males prefer this. Where do you find females preferring it? Frustration. Women are much more interested in frustration. Bimbos, again, this is mostly a male thing. Tickling, equal in both. Sensuality, preference for females. Teens, I found interesting because it was mostly equal between males and females. Then I'm a little surprised.
Yeah.
Erotica, huge preference for females. Females really like erotica when contrasted with males. Again, porn is the amount of females that pursue this when it's got a different name. Public sex, about equal for both. And then femininity, a huge preference for males here. If you look at non-consent here, you get, about equal for both. Grape play, about equal for both. I find that pretty interesting. Obedience, female preference. Master slave, about equal for both. Choking, huge female preference. And bondage heavy, about equal for both.
There you go.
Anyway, love you. I'm very excited for our dinner tonight. And here we might note I've been very disappointed that, Lotus Eaters, who has the highest overlap of viewership that we have, did a whole episode banging on Aela and how terrible she is and how not normal it is. I couldn't even bring myself to watch it. This is Benjamin,
cool,
whatever his name is, who's also Sargon of Akkad. And I was really disappointed about his, unironic pro-Iran take, like, oh, Israel shouldn't be attacking Iran. And I was like, what? I don't get it. I don't, like, I want to like him. I've tried to reach out to him. I tried to make friends with him. He's never gotten back to me, despite our huge overlap, despite him frequently talking at conferences I'm talking to at. And, I guess
And that was all okay, but now he comes for Aela. Hey, and
Yeah,
the
that
door is
scene
open. We're
for
happy
sure.
to talk, but like I think that anyone who dunks on Aela has not met her, has not seriously looked at what she stands for and who
Well,
she
no,
is.
some people are just like, she's a slut, which she is, okay? She sleeps around a lot. Therefore, it is bad that she has a public profile. And I see that and I can understand that, except historically, if you're talking about like conservative cultural institutions, it was actually very common for the top female intellectual to be what today we would call a prostitute.
Yeah, all the famous courtesans going back to Greek and Roman times,
We're
like
the ones who even
Aspasia.
took up aphasia. There was the one in France. What was that one?
Well, there were tons in France. Madame Pompadour, you're probably thinking,
Yeah.
but there were tons who had the salons, who hosted the major
One in ancient
intellectual
Rome, I
minds
can't
of their
remember.
time. Yeah, no, this is like, oh, the lack of respect. Anyway,
Well, no, I think that there is a difference between normalizing something and understand that women who are top tier intellectuals of their age are going to have sexual profiles that may look more male.
Yeah,
And
that's a great way of putting it. And yeah, I mean, yes, I think it's fair to say, and I understand concerns that people have because this is really, really not appropriate for the vast majority of women. But Aela is not proselytizing this way of life. And those other women, most of like the famous
no,
courtesans
some
who
women
also,
end up following her. I understand this accusation.
right, but
They-
that's on them. Like, and I think it's more on the community that they have joined that didn't give them warning signs around it, and not so much on Aela. It's not Ayla's job to be like,
I don't know. I can understand the accusations here. I just I don't like the constantly normalist takes. Here's a great picture of me and Aela at a party that I saw recently on her Facebook. And it's me clearly very excited about a controversial idea. Aela, like, she doesn't agree, but she's like, I'm really interested to respond. And then you see the guy who's like, "Ah!" And then you see the
Face
woman
palm.
who's like this progressive woman who's like, "Ah!"
She just
Like,
looks
how can you
disgusted
be
by it.
saying that? And I think
We
that
can
this is
reword that.
why
Then there's the classic Bay Area progressive woman who looks completely disgusted by you standing in the corner.
Yeah, no, but what I like about this is I think that this is where like our respect for people lie, right? Like, are you like, I don't care how much I disagree with you. Are you willing to have like
Are
an
you
honest
game? Are
intellectual
you gonna?
debate?
Yeah.
Or are you just gonna sit there and pearl clutch and tell me that I'm thinking outside the bounds of what I'm allowed to think?
Mhm.
And I find that to be really frustrating. And I find the the not crazy takes, like the individuals who repeatedly have like normalist takes for their community, over time it's begun to gross me out more. I've seen this within the conservative space where individuals who I used to have respect for, and I'm like, okay, well, like, where's your weird take, where's your crazy take, where's your
Especially the ones who decide that they're just going to poo-poo everything. Oh, you've made such a bad choice. This person's so bad. This was so dumb. Like, stop. Like, people who don't have the balls to stand stuff, I lose my respect for them.
No, and
You
then
do
this has
not
been an
get my
increasing thing
respect
to me.
by just shitting on everyone else for their takes, even if they're dumb takes. And you can make fun of a dumb take. I'm all for that. But if all you do is make fun of dumb takes and you don't put yourself on the line at any point when there's a chance that you might be wrong, no, you're not an intellectual.
Yeah, we do episodes all the time that I know our fans are gonna hate, right?
Yeah.
Like our
Yeah.
take on Iran. I know a lot of our fans don't like our take on Iran, but like, F them, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think our fans who disagree with us on this have honestly thought through like the larger geopolitical consequences.
Well, and our best fans often disagree with us and they enjoy the discourse. They enjoy hearing from people with whom they disagree. And that's awesome. And they don't fault us for being wrong sometimes if we're wrong on a thing. And we admit when we're wrong on things. So anyway.
Which we have multiple times in the past on the show. Has been like, hey, we
got
gotta, like H1BB says, we had this stance, now we have this stance, right?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
anyway, love you to death, Simone. You
Love
are
you too.
amazing. And thank you for not being a prostitute.
You're welcome.
You could be. You'd be great at it.
I think the larger, probably not. The larger thing is, I think everyone's a prostitute if they work, you know? It's just
Question is, who are you selling your body to?
Yeah, who are you selling your body to? It's real. So just
are you selling your body to our fans? Simone, do I need to have a conversation with you? Wait, for the bok cha, when you do it, look up like a video on how to make the meat.
I don't know if I'm going to have time now because the kids are going to descend upon
All right,
the house.
bye, whatever. Do whatever you want. Love you.
Love you too. Loading. Oh, good. I was a little worried that StreamYard would be down again. So scared about outages now.
Donald Trump railing on Medvedev from Russia, talking about giving Iran nukes. Because, he was like, oh, well, now some other country might give Iran nukes. And Trump
Yeah,
was
what
like,
even?
what
First off, no one's going to do that because that's dumb. That's like, oh, someone stole the gun from my unstable schizophrenic friend. Don't worry, I'll give them one of my guns. Well, by the way, like, my house is deeply unstable and I live in a bad neighborhood. Don't have a lot of guns.
it shows people who understand. I mean, I think Russia is really overplaying their hand with this, and they just need to step back because nobody cares. I've been really surprised by the sort of gays for Gaza Trump crowd. That's
what is this? Yeah, this, how dare we get involved in a war?
Well, yeah, it's not like we're putting boots on the ground or something. Look, I will agree with you guys. If it turns out that Trump, bombing these facilities draws American into a wire conflict, then I was wrong and Trump was wrong in this gambit and everything like that, right? If it does not, then you've you've been seriously wrong about everything, and this is one of the better political plays in the past century in terms of quickly dealing with a persistent long-term foe's primary gambling chip.
Yeah.
And this isn't the way that they're talking about it. They're just like, oh, he shouldn't be doing. I saw freaking idiot, what's his name, the one who, Carlson, that's what they call him, Cucker now, because he so quickly flipped up with Trump. His son Trump was like, hey, why are you saying this? But he was like, all the BRICS countries will go to war with us. And I was like, are you like actually retarded? You think India is going to go to war with us over us attacking Iran? Do you know what India thinks of like Muslim majority countries like Pakistan? You think that Brazil is going to go to war with us over Iran? Like, how do you have so little understanding of how the world works and yet are in a position of like talking on air? That like really got, I was like, what?
I imagine he has some people talking into his ear who have caused some.
Well, no, it's clear that, I mean, and this isn't like a conspiracy. Everyone knows he has a lot of contacts within the Russian government.
Sure.
Iran's Russia's ally. Of course, he's going to try to defend them, reflexively, because that's like where his bread's buttered.
And a lot of people are also really colored by the people they're hanging out with and talking to. So if he's talking to those people, he's going to have a really dysmorphic understanding.
Yeah, I don't think that this is like his personality or anything. I just think that, and this is why I call it like the gays for Gaza thing, because like, it is one thing to say we shouldn't put boots on the ground, which I could not agree with more.
Totally. Yeah.
It is another thing to say that we should do nothing to disarm them, which is
we were pretty much if I understand, the only country that had
we were the only country that had the B-2 bombers that could drop this type of bomb.
Well, and we that kind of, what are they called? Massive ordnance something MOBs, the bunker busters.
Yeah.
We were wasting the pretty. We've had those since 2004. We had never used them before.
Rotting in a bunker, right?
I know, just wasting the pretty. Like I said, it's like, a beautiful girl in her 20s just sitting there waiting for the right day. Okay.
And keep in mind that we even, I don't know if you heard this, but we even called Iran and told them we were going to do this beforehand so that they could.
That's so sweet. Well, that's good. Yeah, I was really wondering about that. I was like, I really hope no one was there.
Well, they actually brought like a chain of cars, and they might have evacuated some of the centrifuge materials. So people are really like pissed at them for this.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're like, you didn't really play game, and we tried to be nice to you about this. And I note here that Iran actually did the same favor for us when they did the retaliatory strike against our base in Qatar, letting us know before they did the strike so that we could evacuate the parts of the facility that were going to be hit.
Pretend we're having an argument. You want to tell me why? I want the street to think that you and I are on the outs. What do you want me to do? I'm gonna poke you. Poke me back. I'll poke you all day.
But the point largely being is like, look, if they actually do strike back in meaningful ways that draw us into the conflict, we were wrong. If they don't, then Trump was right. But don't pretend like, I want to protect Iran. Why is Trump attacking Iran? Why is Israel attacking Iran? Like, we don't care that Israel is paying to attack Iran. Iran's a terrible place. And
not to say like the US screwed up with Iran in the past. 100%. Like, there's no doubts there. I get why Iran.
Well,
doesn't
the
like
thing
the
that I
US.
really don't get is when people are like, oh, we've been through this before. Like, they might have weapons of mass destruction, some Middle Eastern country, as an excuse for war. So, one, this is not an excuse for putting boots on the ground. And two, this isn't the United States saying they might have weapons of mass destruction. This is every single European power saying
they're
they
like,
might have weapons of
listen,
mass
they have
destruction
uranium
independently.
refined to what, like 88%, 90% is weapons grade. Like, they were right there.
No,
Okay.
and independently saying, no, but the point I'm making is this isn't like one intelligence agency saying this. This is every intelligence agency on saying this.
Yeah.
This is, despite how much France and the UK and Germany hate Israel, all of them saying that they approve of this. Like, wild to get those three guys to agree that attacking somebody is a good thing. So like a lot of this is just like really false equivalencies. As Michael put it, the point that somebody made a mistake like this once doesn't mean that every time in the future somebody says something like this, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get to today's episode.
Yeah.